I think with our benefit philosophy, whenever we talked about it, the North Star is people first always. And I feel like through our whole venture throughout this initiative, that is always, in our mind. And that's really our focus is people first always.
Welcome to Empowered Owners, the podcast that takes you inside Empowered Ventures. I'm your host, Chris Fredericks. In each episode, I'll have a discussion with one of our employees to discover and highlight their distinct personalities, perspectives, and skills, while also keeping you in the loop with exclusive news, updates on company performance, and a glimpse into the future plans of Empowered Ventures. This is an opportunity for me to learn more about our amazing employee owners, and an opportunity for you to hear regularly from me and others from within Empowered Ventures. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Empowered Owners. I'm excited to have my fellow colleagues, Emily and Kim, with me again to talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is healthcare and EV's initiative, Healthcare for Us. We did have an initial episode about Healthcare for Us last fall. And so now we decided it'd be good to get back together and just do an update and talk about what's happened since then and maybe where we see things going from here. So yeah, I guess, let's just start with you, Kim. What's happened since our last episode on Healthcare for Us?
Yeah. Well, it was crazy when you said last fall. I'm like, oh, it really has been a few months.
Time flies.
I think I'm going to describe it as a reality check. I feel like that's where we are now. Back in the fall when we first talked about it, we definitely had a vision, still have a vision of what we think is possible and exciting to just forge ahead and see what's possible. And I think some reality checks will have occurred of like, okay, we have a passion for this. We understand the why, but how do we get that to everyone else for them to understand the why personally? As employee owners, but also just individuals and their families. Just now we are starting to get feedback of what people think about it. And there's still some quizzical looks, I'll just say. And some of them saying, yeah, I still don't really know what we're doing here. But I mean, it's still exciting. And, so it's not halted. It's not, okay, this isn't going to work. It's not that at all. But it's just like, okay, so here is the reality. It's not everyone else's passion in their world, but how do we get them to get excited about it a little bit? Or, okay, I'm not going to use the word excited because it's healthcare. Interested. I'll use that word instead.
Well, I'm going to respond to that with a confession, and I haven't confessed this yet until just now, but I'm feeling inspired. I think I'm one of those people that I think the two of you, Emily and Kim, you bring the passion for this topic that I find helps me want to engage. Just initially here, I want to thank you both for what you've done to just get this going, because getting anything going is the hardest part. So Emily, what about you? Where are you at with just how we've gone so far, in terms of what's happened since the launch of Healthcare for Us?
Yeah, I would echo what Kim has said. Definitely a reality check on what it takes to get a program, or I would even dare to use the word movement, what it takes to get a movement going, because what we're attempting to do is make a topic that most people don't care about at all interesting enough that people will lean into it with us in a way that will impact how we use healthcare and benefits. So I've always been very careful to delineate between the two. Healthcare is the actual care you receive or the care you give yourself. It's wellness. It's everything having to do with your actual health and your relationship with your doctor. Health benefits is how you pay for it. And I think sometimes we confuse ourselves because we confuse the two. We think benefits is healthcare. And it's not. Insurance is a separate thing, but it's so confusing. It's so annoying. We just had at our annual Employee Ownership Summit a conversation with our Employee Ownership Communications Committee members about Healthcare for Us. And many people said, confession, what you just said, Chris, I hate health insurance. I don't like thinking about it. I spend literally 5 minutes right before open enrollment, eeny, meeny, miny, mowing between my plan options, and I don't want to. Why should I? And I feel like that was part of that reality check is try as we might to have given bullet points on the why this matters and why we need to create, not just want, why we need to create this movement where everybody can lean in together. on what's going on inside healthcare and benefits, those bullet points haven't stuck. And what have they been? The bullet points have been, how do we optimize our usage of our healthcare and our benefits? So getting everybody to understand that not all pharmacies charge the same, and they could save money and they could save the plan money by going to a different pharmacy. How other service providers fall in that same bucket. If you need an MRI, for instance, or any kind of imaging, those places are known for being very disparate in terms of how much they actually charge you and how much they charge the plan. So being a good healthcare consumer and how we optimize our plan usage, that is one piece of healthcare for us. Another piece is understanding what's coming down the pike and just being able to look out over the horizon, and including our employee owners' experiences with healthcare and benefits to help us be looking for the things that would actually be helpful for them. So, those bullet points just weren't resonating. I think for me, where we've come now is that we're doggedly committed to this ongoing conversation enterprise-wide, but absent a clear, concise, and compelling why that we're doing it, we won't get off the ground. And interestingly enough, at the summit, we learned collectively from an outside expert a very simple storytelling technique. And so I think the next really awesome opportunity for healthcare for us is to come up with that clear and concise story of why. And so I'm hoping we're on a podcast episode here in the near future where we're telling that story. It's kind of starting to come together in my head, but I think the story will land differently than the bullet points. And that will be an exciting turning point, I think, for us, where what started to happen at the summit was, people leaning in and saying, oh, I get it. What we save as a company on our premiums actually impacts our share price. Or, oh, I get it. How I use the plan impacts my fellow employee owners. This isn't just about me. There's some putting our ownership hat on stuff that can happen, but for whatever reason, it does. Reality check is great, Kim. It just feels ambiguous, nebulous, kind of up until this point. But we're in the trenches. We're doing it. We're getting there. And I think we're about to turn a really exciting corner, honestly.
That resonates. Kim, what do you think about all that and where we go from here, I guess, with regards to this initiative?
And I think when Emily and I had originally started talking, we knew we needed to evoke some sort of feeling in people for them to really grab a hold of it and understand, oh, wow, this really does impact me and the enterprise. And I don't know, this was before we talked about storytelling. Storytelling's always been a part of EV. We know that's important for us, but without really knowing the how, or even for us really understanding how important that is, I feel like we did just jump right in. And data points, they are not going to get that, fire burning in someone to be like, oh yeah, they're not going to get that passion from data like we do and bullet points. So I feel like that story, not only our story as to why the Healthcare for Us initiative is so important, but for each individual's story, there are some fantastic ones that we've heard about that people realize, oh, this isn't, again, being done to me. I own this. I can make decisions. I can ask questions of my physician that I never even thought I could. I didn't know I could do that. And the story of, there is a whole world out there that we don't even know yet what that looks like. And we're all, leaning in together to figure it out. But I think that we have to just get some feelings from people. And I think telling those stories and really connecting to them is how we're going to do that.
That's great. We will have another episode that's going to recap the EO Summit that happened. So that's going to be another fun episode that we didn't really talk much about the healthcare conversation in particular. So I guess maybe it'd be interesting to just pause and dig in a little bit further. What did you hear from the other employee owners, part of our companies and the rest of the holding company team, when this was a topic and a discussion? Just what were some of the things that you heard and how did that conversation kind of evolve over the session?
Well, I think the first question, Emily, wasn't it what I asked? I asked, what are your thoughts on everything that we've distributed so far? I think, and it was blank looks at first. And I was like, okay, we kind of were feeling that anyway, but it just okay, well, you definitely let us know that. And then I said, who has looked at it? And there weren't very many hands. And, these are folks that we talk about healthcare for us a lot with, I would say more than just our average employee owners. And if this group isn't really leaning into it. We know others aren't as well. So that was kind of I think, I really do think that was like my first question I asked the group. So I was like, okay, let's take a breath and reset. But again, it wasn't like, oh, I'm so discouraged. It's just like, okay, well, that's not hitting the mark that we were hoping it would. So let's figure this out together. And what would get you to start having conversations and talking about it?
Yeah. And I think that's then when we got some honest hands raising and saying, I don't like the topic. I see an email come through and my eyes glaze over and I barely skim it and I move right on. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that the biggest opportunity then is to demonstrate really through this compelling story why we're so passionate, why we're so committed. And then to Kim's point, highlight our employee owner stories who are equally as passionate, because there are some, they weren't in the room at the summit, but there are some others who've been a part of this focus group from the beginning before it was ever even healthcare for us, who would consider themselves healthcare advocates. And so highlighting those stories so that we can start to create sort of a groundswell, back to the movement idea of interest. But I would say in the room at the summit, some of the other pieces of feedback were just a discomfort in engaging any kind of conversation with fellow employee owners around healthcare because it's so personal, because this is a very private topic, which very much resonated with me. And so I thought, yeah, okay, we've got to be really clear about what this conversation is and what it isn't. There's some privacy to be taken into consideration there. But what was interesting is that coming out of the summit, all of the committees, when they shared their plans for the year, highlighted that amplifying healthcare for us messaging was a part of their annual plan. So even though the actual conversation together felt like this reality check of, whoa, we didn't really get this ball as far down the field as we thought we might have, I think just that hour together in the room did. And now, folks are trusting us. They're leaning in. They don't really know what they're leaning into yet because we still haven't gotten that clarity out, but they're trusting us. And they're like, yeah, Evie, we're with you. Now arm us, give us what to do next, but we're with you. And that's really exciting.
And it was almost once we got past that initial response and there was like that safe space, because even though we're passionate about healthcare, it's not like we love talking about the insurance piece of that, the traditional way. But there were even some great ideas that people were like, hey, have you thought about this, as far as just pushing, little pieces of education out to folks. A few weeks ago, we pushed out a pharmacy cost comparison tool. Someone today sent me a note that they used that tool and saved $70 on their prescription. That just is encouraging to know we are on the right path. But it was just that conversation in that room. The person had that tool, but they were like, well, when I was at the summit, we talked about that again. And so I said, well, share your story with other people.
That's a story. Yeah, that's fantastic. What I love about this too, and I'm sure it was for you, especially Kim, when you get that conversation going, I'm sure it was like, oh boy, when there was the no response. So I'm kudos to you for just rallying and immediately, continuing to lead that conversation. But it's so cool to me how quickly it turned into a real conversation. And what strikes me about it is that it's the in-person relationships that enabled that. Conversations just don't work well over emails and texts, and they can kind of happen virtually, but like nothing really beats that in person to get a real conversation going. And I guess this just for me kind of reinforces that to some degree.
And the group, everyone knew, like there was one person specifically that spoke up and just said, I just don't like this. Like, I don't even like doing my own open enrollment. And you could just see there were groups of people that leaned in like, okay, we're not alone. I'm not on an island here. You're right, though. The body language, even at the beginning of that conversation, was very like, almost like, all right, I'm preparing myself for this. It's not going to be fun, but we have like 1 hour. We can get through it. But by the end, it was very relaxed and casual. And it was a very positive conversation at that point.
That's great. So where do we go from here? I think that, to me, I'm feeling really encouraged. That conversation really did, in hindsight, end up seeming like it was probably something that moved us forward in a meaningful way and re-energized, got some momentum going. So since then, the last couple of weeks, like, what are you thinking about takeaways and really action items going forward that you're thinking about or that are already planned?
Yeah, well, there's really three. The first one is back to the storytelling. creating that very short, very concise, very compelling why story from sort of a macro perspective, why it's important to Empowered Ventures as a collective of businesses, and then soliciting and amplifying, sort of refining individual stories that sort of fold in under that or reinforce that and getting those out. I think that's step one. Step two would be sort of what I'm calling communication infrastructure. So that's both systems. As people inside EV know, we don't share systems. We don't centralize our IT here among the companies. So it's always been sort of a conundrum of how to bridge that gap. But whether we're talking about how we're knitting together our systems enough to be able to have this shared communication, and then what and when and where and how and with who, all of those communication pieces are happening, making sure that we're just in lockstep with our company leadership, with their finance teams, with their HR teams, with any other folks inside the companies who've raised their hands and said that they want to be a Healthcare for Us advocate. That sort of larger group, how we're engaging them in a very regular cadence, and the very small tidbits that we're arming them with to be able to then echo into their companies on our behalf. When I say communication infrastructure, it's that kind of thing. And then the third thing is just this project that we've had going sort of in the background around evaluating who is our best partner in this whole thing going forward in terms of a broker or advisor. This is sort of the Wild West out there because healthcare is so ripe for disruption, and we're aware of that. And so it would be unwise for us not to evaluate what all has emerged even in the last couple of years in terms of consultant or advisor or broker capability, and then really determine who is best aligned strategically with us, and is there cause for us to, make a change there. So really it's those three things. It's the compelling story around why, it's our communication infrastructure, and then it's this evaluating who our partner may be going forward to help us continue to make the decisions that are best for EV.
And I'd also say on the flip side of that, actually, in addition to that, so Emily and I come at the benefit piece from two totally different experiences as far as in our professional careers. And so we are really leaning in and I would say educating ourselves on the other's view or the other's, history where they have been. So, that way we know, and Emily and I kind of laugh, and I always say this because I'm, again, HR traditional benefit insurance world. And so I told Emily, I'm like, yeah, we'll learn about this. And I'm going to tell you if you're crazy or not.
And she'll do the same to you too, I'm sure.
But it's true. Like, it's just out of that box thinking. It's not that traditional approach. And so I think for us, having all of the information that we can, just to know what questions to ask, because we're never going to be the experts in healthcare, but who can we partner with? And, what lens should we be looking at to ask the right questions?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of companies because this has grown for decades as just an issue and a challenge for people and for businesses, there seems to be a lot of action now that wasn't there in the last maybe 10 years ago. Just people trying a lot of different things. And that's exciting. There's innovation happening constantly, it seems like, but it's also hard to wrap your arms around all that and really know, especially maybe in our situation where we've got such a dispersed group of people all over the country. And I appreciate how careful we're being to make sure we are exploring what's possible for our people and how to help, maybe find innovative ways we could, make a difference, but also being careful not to try something that could be too far. Maybe it's not quite ready for us yet, or there's a lot of great stuff happening that maybe in 20 years is going to change everything, but maybe it's not quite ready yet for us. So I love that we're open-minded about all that right now. And we're not just saying, no, that's not for us. And we're also not saying, oh, we'll try anything, and just willy-nilly trying stuff. So I really like how we're kind of saying, yeah, we're going to try, but we're going to embrace what's possible, but be pragmatic about it. Does that resonate for you both in terms of how we're left brain, right brain approaching this topic?
Absolutely. Yeah. Kim and I were talking this morning, and I shared with her an analogy of a story when my now 20-year-old was about 6 or 7. I was homeschooling both of my boys at the time, and we were talking about Columbus and how he discovered, this whole new continent by trying to sail around to the other side of his own landmass and not realizing that there was so much more to the world, and how he was so distraught, literally sitting next to me on the couch crying because everything had already been discovered. And he was so sad that there wasn't anything left to discover. And I just thought, how sweet, first of all, a little insight into this little human who's going to be, on a mission to discover things his whole life. And then also chuckling to myself, like, oh, child, there's plenty left to discover. It might not be land masses, but there's plenty left to discover. Anyways, Kim and I were talking about it. This is like that. 90% of companies and individuals are content to be on their landmass, which has been the status quo. But there is a whole world out there emerging. And in fact, we will have to engage it. And I feel like we're just right at the cusp of pushing out to sea. And so much of what healthcare for us is unknown. We're literally building a boat together that we've never built before, charting a path that we've never been on before, and that nobody has. There's no playbook for this. We can't go read books about it. This is all new, and that's why it feels so hard. But yes, Chris, to your point, it totally resonates that in that journey, we don't want to set sail on a boat that's half built and sink. We don't want to jump onto things that are half baked. Also, we don't want to just stay landlocked and shrug our shoulders and be like, well, 15 years from now, I guess when we're forced into the new thing, we'll do it then, and miss out on the opportunity to benefit in the interim.
Absolutely. And we also said this isn't something that just Kim and Emily can do either. We can't sail that ship, just the two of us. We need everyone again to lean in and do that. And I think with our benefit philosophy, whenever we talked about it, the North Star is people first always. And I feel like through our whole venture throughout this initiative, whether it's communicating to employee owners or whether it's, with our brokers, advisors, that is always in our mind. And that's really our focus. It's people first always. And that means their families also, but it also is the spend of the healthcare and the benefits, but it's the person, their experience also. And I think when we have that lens and, we're willing to take the adventure and see where it goes, we're going to land somewhere. We don't know what is the perfect spot out there for us, but we will land somewhere. I do have confidence in that.
Yeah. And I love what the somewhere is a healthcare experience, a health and wellness and healthcare benefit experience that's good for people, good for our Empowered Ventures employee owners and their families. That's what healthcare for us really means, I think. So that resonates a lot with me. This has been awesome. Kim, what would you say at this point we're asking of people? I think we're feeling that we've got direction, still got energy, we've got commitment to this initiative for the long term. What are we asking of them now?
Yeah, I think now we just want them to not be afraid anymore and understand the importance of it. And we're not saying this has to be, 60% of your life, 20%. Just, if something is sent out, read it. If you hear someone talking about it, ask questions. And it's just more about starting the conversation, I would say, at this point. And before, it was definitely a subject like, I just don't want to talk about it. I just ignore it. I'll think about it in open enrollment time in the fall. But just be open to it now. And, maybe just be inquisitive.
Yeah, be curious, maybe. We're just trying to inspire a little bit more curiosity for me, people like me who haven't been curious up until this point. Yeah, and I think this is doing that. So it feels to me like we're definitely making progress at engaging people in that way. Anything less to add for either of you to wrap this up?
No, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for hosting us.
Great. Well, thank you both. Appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful to everyone to feel like they understand where we're going with this initiative and that we're still really excited about it. So thank you both for coming on Empowered Owners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Emily and Kim. Empowered Owners is a podcast by and for the employee owners of Empowered Ventures. Special thanks to Share Your Genius for producing. You can find show notes and transcripts on our website at empowered.ventures. Full video episodes are on YouTube at empowered_ventures. If you have a question for us about EV, our companies, or employee ownership, contact us at hello@empowered.ventures. You can also text or leave a voicemail at 317-643-2383. Thanks for listening.